All right. See if we can get this audio fixed. It seems a little spotty. I don't think it's working. Give me about 10 seconds to sort this audio out. Hmm. So let's see. I don't hear anything. So I'm not sure the mic is working. I think the mic is working, but it's going through the computer and not through this big, expensive fucking system that costs about $17,000. Stupid. And you know another thing that's weird? For any of you that use GPT, it was frozen for about 3 hours today. Was not working. Isn't that weird? No GPT. You think, I don't need AI until you need it. All right, let me see if it will play. Let me know if you guys can hear the warning. See, you're going to hear my voice because it's going through the computer, but you may not hear what's going through the big giant system. So hold on. See if you can hear the warning. Yeah, this is completely effed. Oh well, today's the sound is going to be dodgy because it's going through the yeah, the sound is going to be dodgy because it's going through the MacBook. For some reason, the Rode whole system has unplugged. There is no Rode connection. What a piece of shit. Anyway, I've had it for a year, so I guess it's probably out. It's probably time to buy a whole new one because I've had it for a whole year because nothing works after a year. That's part of the other BS of the world that we live in. Anyway, yeah. We'll talk about a couple of cool things today. We'll do some open Q&A because we can do that even with the crappy speaker. But the Grayscale got a decision in their case, so we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about deflationary psychology. So those are all things that are pretty cool. All right, what I'm going to do, because I don't think any of the background stuff, I don't think anything over here works. So since it doesn't, we're going to treat this as if I was away on a voyage and having to use that little MacBook Air. And it wasn't always the greatest, but we got the job done. But when we did that, we usually put on a little background music. We will go with Feeding the Ducks, maybe? It's not bad. Let me know if it's monotonous. Yeah, I know that you can hear my voice, but that's only because I'm yelling at this stupid ass computer. It's not, you can't see, but there is this giant system of really expensive and completely useless shit. And another thing that's weird that doesn't make any sense, there's a connection to go straight to the internet, like from the wall. Only if you plug that in, it's worse reception than Wi-Fi, which also comes from the same place. So that's pretty stupid too. There's a lot of stupid stuff. Yeah, the microphone doesn't right now. The microphone doesn't work, and I know that because when I go into the system, it just shows that it's not even recognizing. It's not recognizing the road, the microphone, any of the expensive, stupid shit that I have. Anyway, c'est la vie. Okay, you guys probably noticed that the market is up a little bit. Let me show you guys that. Oh, really quick. We are at, where's the number? 291 of 1,000 for the digital investor. So we will start here in a few days. So September 1st. No longer will the Monday, Wednesday, Friday show be public facing. I think what we'll do is go like 10 or 15 minutes and then whoop, gone. Then that's when we'll start like the kind of more traditional building the portfolio, going all the way. Because why? Well, because September is portfolio building month, where we will start from zero and build your entire portfolio. Well, you do whatever you want to do, but we will build a portfolio from the ground up. And it also won't matter how many currency units you have, because that's not the point. It's all about percentages. So with that, let's talk a little bit about crypto news. But in the context of that, obviously the grayscale decision is what's propping the market right now. So keep that in mind. Let me shoot over here. Let's do a market update, and let me explain what that means. It's not a win for grayscale, other than it makes the SEC go back and look at the petition again. So that's kind of interesting. It vacates the original judgment. We will discuss all that here in un momentito. All right. So yes, Grayscale won their appeal against the SEC. So they submitted a rule change. The SEC said no. And the appeals court said yes. But not the same kind of yes. You're probably going to get a lot of bad information out there where people are like, yeah, this isn't a win in that Grayscale gets to convert to a trust. This is that the SEC must reevaluate. But that's pretty good. But if you look at what that has caused a pretty good reaction in the market. So, I mean, if you just go down the list, we're up 4.5%. I mean, this morning Bitcoin was 26.1. So anyway, obviously 4.6 is kind of like the bar, the line in the sand. So anything that's not over 4 is just 4.5 is just tracking with Bitcoin or below. So Ethereum underperforming, XRP underperforming, Cardano just about break even, Doge who cares but underperforming, Matic up a little bit, but they also released they're releasing some developer kits and some other stuff. But Matic is really trying to make a push. I think Matic is maybe a little bit worried that they're going to lose ground to Optimism, which they should worry, because there's been a lot of shakeups in the upper management at Matic. There's a lot of beefing, a lot of war, a lot of inner office battles going on. So we'll see if they get past that. Sometimes these things can tear companies apart. Optimism 5.6%. So again, the layer 2s are outperforming not only Ethereum but outperforming Bitcoin. Algorand break even, exactly the same as Bitcoin, so that's not a win, although at least it's 10 cents. I mean, God, Jesus, that team has to be so freaking embarrassed. I mean, just really embarrassed. If you work for Algorand, if you're in the Algorand community, how do you look to your left or your right and just not find yourself effing embarrassed at what you guys have done and how you've let that just disintegrate into dust? I mean, Jesus, man. Talk about a dumpster fire. You guys realize that Most of Bitcoin is built on the back of work that Silvio Macaulay did. I don't know if people realize that. There is no Bitcoin without Silvio. None. Doesn't exist. Period. And yet, Algorand is just a dumpster fire. God. Anyway, we'll see. Performing break even flow, no one cares. Zcash, no one cares. Not really. Then you're looking at your other assets. So again, 4.5 is the line in the sand. Underperforming slightly. Sophia performing well, not where it was a few days ago. It got up to 17. I mean, a few weeks ago, it got to 27, basically 27 cents, and then precipitously back down. It was in the high 12s to 13 ish just a few days ago. So it's bumped up this last week. They haven't rolled anything else. They haven't rolled anything out yet materially interesting. I think that they need to communicate better with the public, not just with the Singularity Net public. So they are doing a show. They're at a conference, I think 2 weeks from now, in Las Vegas, or maybe it'll be 2 weeks from Friday. Anyway, it'll be in Las Vegas, and that should be good for Sophia. So that's good. All right. Rejuve still sucks. Why does it suck? Well, they don't really need a token, as it turns out. And until they solve the Y token, and this was Rejuve is a very cool project that doesn't need a token, is what it seems like. Newnet, quiet. It's investable in my opinion, but it's very early, and I hope they can make their value proposition before some other companies just do it better. I don't know. I hope so. I know that Kabir has a hard time communicating with people, and so that's been a sticking point. You need a mouthpiece. Anyway, Cogito is up, but only because it was so far down. I mean, 2 points. It's up 13% on Who Cares. Terrible team. The team that's actually doing stuff for the company. No real sense of responsibility there. You have Ben Gortzel, who's kind of consulting and advising, but he can only do so much. He's managing this giant effort. Cogito is on the back burner. It is run by idiots, unfortunately. Well-intentioned, foolish legacy banker idiots from HSBC. And there is no way to sugarcoat that. So we invested in it, and it's a flop. And the people are a flop. And when you approach them and try to communicate with them, what you get is very simpleton, very simpleton responses where, like little kids, like, well, yeah, but no, that's not a business. Anyway, and then Hypercycle approaching 50 cents again. So it's bucking. So Hypercycle and Sophia. But the big story is, and we will get to it just now, is Grayscale. So what does that mean? Well, here's the actual. Can you guys see that? You can see that. I can get this thing. You guys get it. There's people subscribed to the show. Great. Let me nuke that little. Where are you? Let me hide that. Boop. Okay. So here's what you're looking at. And let me tell you what it does. What does it actually mean? So, Grayscale, they have won their appeal, and that means that the SEC must review their ETF bid. Now, this is coming from the appeals court. A federal appeals court ordered the SEC to vacate its rejection of the trust. When Grayscale said, "Hey, we want to convert our trust into an exchange-traded fund, an ETF." Excuse me. As the SEC tends to do, they just flat out said no. But it's not that simple. It turns out you need reasons for such things, and and Grayscale has some deep pockets, and they said, we are going to sue you for your arbitrary and capricious treatment of Bitcoin ETFs. The U.S. may be, now this may lead to, I don't think it'll be Grayscale, but it will lead to this. It could lead to this first spot Bitcoin exchange traded fund. My guess is it's going to be BlackRock because they're the ones that are in bed with everyone and own everyone else. Anyone they're not in bed with, they own the bed and they own the hotel room. Anyway, a federal court ruled that the U.S. SEC must review its previous rejection of Grayscale's attempt to convert the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust into an ETF. Grayscale, manager behind the world's largest cryptocurrency fund, first applied for its GBTC closed-end fund to be converted into an ETF back in October of 2021. So, back a little bit. The SEC rejected the application, stating in its decision that the application failed to answer the SEC's question about preventing market manipulation, as well as other concerns. I think it's funny because the SEC times their enforcement decisions and enforcement disclosures around Congress and such public discourse. So if Congress is going to meet and talk about crypto a day or two before or the same day, the SEC will release something and they'll say, we're going after this company. And the idea is so that Gary can say, look, we don't need any supervision. Everything's fine. Look what we're doing. It's a little scammy. I mean, if I know that Bitcoin, what is this? What's that dumbass? BitBoy, it got fired from his own YouTube thing. The guy was a piece of shit anyway, but now he's an unemployed piece of shit. Well, maybe he can go and help Gary Gensler, because it seems like they're both kind of idiots. And it's frustrating because I used to have a lot of respect for Gary Gensler. I never had any respect for BitBoy. He's always been a scummy garbage peddler. But I did have quite a big amount of. I used to watch a lot of educational content that was. So MIT will put out a lot of their professors when they have these classes and stuff. You can go get and watch these lectures, and Gary had some great lectures. So he's like, I did like the guy. He's not like Tim Roughgarden. He's not like a game theoretical expert or anything like that, but he does understand crypto, which is why it made it so weird that when he got to the SEC, but then you think about it, it's not weird at all. If you are a puppet and a bunch of people with a lot of money have their hand shoved all the way up your ass, you're going to do whatever it is for those guys. So that's the Gary that we see is a puppet, seems like. Anyway, so Grayscale then had filed an appeal against the SEC like an after the rejection, like 1 hour later, because they knew that the rejection was coming. So in the filing, Grayscale asked the U.S. Court of Appeals in the District of Columbia Circuit to review the SEC's order. And Grayscale, by the way, Grayscale is a part of Digital Currency Group. This is important because DCG is currently embroiled in problems between Gemini and Genesis when that whole earn thing unwound. So keep that in mind, because in a second I'm going to talk to you about that. Anyway, so this court decision comes after a flurry of large institutions had filed for spot Bitcoin ETFs, BlackRock, and Fidelity, like a bunch. Anyway, including ARK, Kathy. Oh, Kathy. I don't know who's going to be the first spot ETF filing that's going to, or the rule change that will be allowed, but I know it won't be ARK Investments. That's all I know. I know who it won't be. I can't tell you with certainty who it will be, but I'd guess BlackRock. Anyway, BlackRock filed in June. BlackRock's filing generated a lot of, obviously optimism, because everybody's like, well, it's BlackRock, and they're kind of super sketchy and giant with many trillions of dollars under management, meaning that their fingers are in all the puppets. They're in all the puppets. Anyway, Fidelity had also filed. There were 7 Bitcoin future ETFs that had been trading since 2021, but these are all cash settled, which is not all that interesting, actually. It's the spot settled stuff that makes the parties actually hold. See, here's the big difference. You want to boil it all down? Spot settled versus cash. Spot settled have to have and move the asset. cash settled, there's no reason to actually hold Bitcoin. This is one of the problems. Similarly, in the gold market, and what you end up having, ETFs in the beginning sound really cool, but you end up having a whole fake paper synthetic market that doesn't trade the underlying asset. So like right now in the gold market, you have more than 500 ounces of, we'll call it paper or synthetic gold for every 1 ounce of actual physical gold. And you would say, well, that's weird. That's a problem, because if everybody wanted their gold in the paper market, there's just not that does not exist. Yes, that is true. So that's the financialization of a commodity or financialization of an asset, which has its own problems. But it did a lot for gold as far as the price of gold. It's good for a forex. Like I do believe that a spot ETF, a spot settled ETF, where you're forced to possess the asset, is good for a 4x on Bitcoin. What does that mean? 30 to 120 or so. I think when this happens next year sometime, you could see a 2024 Bitcoin easily over 100K. 100, 120 is not ridiculous. You say, wow, that's so awesome. That's so much. Yeah. But if Bitcoin does a 4x, what do you think the rest of the more, I don't say more quality, because Bitcoin is just not competing with a lot of these assets. It's stored value. But what do you think those other, some of these alternative assets are going to do? In my opinion, better. Well, anyway, we'll see. So the Grayscale product has been trading at a huge discount to the underlying asset since February of 2021. The discount deepened to 50% in December after the SEC reiterated its reasons for denying Grayscale's application to convert the trust into an ETF. However, the large names that were filing right for spot ETFs, the discount at Grayscale narrowed to about 25%, which you still think, wow, that's a big deal. Meaning, if you enter the Grayscale trust, the amount of Bitcoin exposure you get costs you 25% less than so the way Grayscale works is cash or Bitcoin goes in one end, shares come out the other end. You can't sell off your GBTC and get Bitcoin. It doesn't work that way. You can invest into it with cash. You can invest into it with Bitcoin, but it only spits out shares. Shares you would then go on the market and have to sell those. So there's a disparity. There's a little delta there of like 20, 25%. Anyway, market analysts have long said that the conversion from a closed-end fund, which is what Grayscale currently is, to an ETF would likely eliminate that discount, meaning there would be a reason, if you like Bitcoin and they won this, I mean, almost instantly people would pour into GBTC to arbitrage, to arbitrage that delta, to arbitrage that gap, that discount that GBTC is currently trading at. I'm not telling anybody to do that, but maybe some easy money. The structure of the fund would largely stay the same, except for a few things. The shares would now be registered with the SEC under the Securities Exchange Act of 1933. Remember, there was two. There's 1933 and 1934. It's basically breaking up people, products, companies, all into sections. So to have a full understanding of, and we should probably talk about that at some point. I probably will with Digital Investor, because all of these rule changes and requests and all this and the SEC, it always goes back to the SEC, the Act of 33 or 34. So we probably should look at that. Anyway, prior to the conversion, GBT shares were offered through private placement process, meaning they were initially only available to accredited investors and subject to a 6-month holding period. You're kind of stuck. Call it a cliff, call it a lockup. Anyway, another alteration to the structure in the shares is that the shares will be uplisted from OTC to the NYSE ARCA. So this will allow for redemptions, which were not previously allowed. So that's cool. Grayscale also stated that it would lower its fees if GBTC got converted to an ETF, the fund charged a 2% annual fee, they would lower this. Now, listen, the best way to buy Bitcoin is just to buy Bitcoin. But for a lot of people that had retirement accounts, things like that, then the grayscale version of that made a lot of sense. So that's where we're at. Now, why the DCG bit means anything is because they're currently embroiled in an issue with Genesis creditors, and they have reached a deal in principle with Genesis creditors, which could help them recover between 70 and 90% in the US dollar equivalent for the assets that were kind of frozen, locked up, whatever. And so that's for unsecured creditors, and then 65 to 90% recovery on an in-kind basis. You say, what the hell does that mean? Okay, so basically DCG has reached a deal with Genesis. You guys know Genesis went under. Genesis was doing the earned stuff for Gemini. That's a whole weird thing. Anyway, and then Gemini got made to look stupid because they are stupid. And it turns out that just about nothing they do over there was actually them. It was always somebody else. There's nothing that the Gemini, the twins, the Winklevi, what they do is you are their exit liquidity. That exchange was built for no other reason than to sell you their assets that they bought early. Period, full stop. There is zero desire to push the crypto space forward. You need to understand that. If you understand that, great. Keep your account. Keep giving those dudes money. Just understand that you are their exit liquidity. If you're okay with that, that's fine. I mean, everybody's somebody's exit liquidity, I guess. Anyway, DCG reached a deal with Genesis creditors to resolve the claims brought by Genesis during bankruptcy, according to a court filing this morning. The plan could result in recoveries of 70 to 90% in USD equivalent for the unsecured creditors and 65 to 90% recovery for an in-kind basis, depending on the denomination of the digital assets. All of the estimated recoveries are subject, obviously, to market pricing and some kind of very definitive documentation at the moment that they would initiate this. The lending arm of Genesis had halted withdrawals, if you guys remember, last November, and this was in the wake of the FTX collapse. I think it's really funny that all these very competent business people, very competent businesses got their asses kicked when a scammy exchange went under. It makes you wonder why all these really smart people were in bed with FTX and Celsius and Luna, and like the list goes, and Three Arrows. I mean, does any God, these gurus, man, go down the list, right? Like every one of these douchebags, Novogratz, Rao Powell, all of them drank all the stupid Kool-Aid, ate every dumb biscuit. They did as much bad as they could possibly do, and then they're all like, well, it wasn't me. What do you mean it wasn't you, dummy? You have a fucking tattoo on your arm. So it's like, Rao Powell was on a video, a live stream, talking about Luna when Luna unwound. And then, of course, he went back, started erasing tweets and all this. I never supported Luna. I never even understood it. Oh, really? You never understood it, but you're a genius. You're a guru. You understand everything. And just 4 months earlier, you had been telling your many thousands of subscribers that it was the path to like nirvana. Oh, 20% a year, we're going to all get rich. It's easy. You just take your money and like. These dudes are all scumbags, man. Ugh. Anyway, the lending arm of Genesis, after they had halted withdrawals, then you have FTX collapses. This is all like last year stuff, right? Then the Genesis filed for bankruptcy protection in the beginning of this year. So last month, DCG, which is the parent group of Genesis, also of Grayscale, said in a letter that it was close to reaching an in-principle agreement to resolve all their claims. Great. By the way, DCG is also the parent of CoinDesk. So when you're reading news in crypto, understand that news is coming through a flow that has people at DCG deciding what will and won't be news today. Anyway, so this is good. To satisfy DCG's existing liabilities of approximately $630 million in unsecured loans due in May of 2023 and $1.1 billion under an unsecured promissory note due in 2032. A new partial repayment agreement was agreed on. The repayment will be done in 2 tranches of $328.8 million with a 2-year maturity and $830 million with a 7-year maturity. DCG, excuse me, would also pay $275 million in 4 installments after the date of the partial repayment agreement on account on the May. So look, they owe a lot of money. DCG owns a lot of stuff, and if the stuff that you own gets nuked, you own it. You own that debt. So that's what they're doing. They're working through their debt service. And this is what happens when markets fold. This is just what happens when markets roll down. Okay, let's talk about some. Let me hit some general questions, and I want to spend a few minutes, and I want to talk about deflation and like a deflationary mindset, where I think people maybe their heads need to be as we move into what is a very clear kind of like deflationary world. All right. And real quick, the Rejuve token will be used. Yeah. Let me ask you this. And again, I'm not pointing fingers, but when you think about, if you're asking why does a token exist, why token, it doesn't mean that you can create some reason for a token to exist. It means that there is some reason why no other token could suffice. So you guys tell me, what do you think? Is there any other token in the Singularity Net ecosystem or in any ecosystem that could serve the function of purchasing certain therapies that Rejuve discovers in the future? Is there any other payment system? Is there any other token that could ever facilitate a payment? Anyone? That's why we say why token, and that's why we say the Rejuve token doesn't need to exist. There is nothing that the Rejuve token does that any other token could not do. You could use AGIX tokens. You could use stable coins. You could use the dreaded Bitcoin or any other asset. There is zero need. So it doesn't solve the why token problem. Now they may imagine they may come up with some very novel use for the token. You'll be like, oh yeah, but there's no new technology in the token. The token is not necessary, so it's just not necessary. Now that doesn't mean the price won't go up or go down or whatever, but there is no need for that token. Okay. Does the Base protocol threaten optimism? No, because Base is running on optimism. There is no Base without optimism. Base is a derivative of optimism. You guys know that, right? Like it's part of it. So I think what's good for the goose, good for the gander. Matter of fact, they had discussed, I think there's a plan rolling out or it's already been passed, where whatever kind of proceeds and fees that Base generates, part of those are going to be sent back to optimism. Because again, it's running on it. Base is not really its own protocol. Base runs on optimism. Make sense? I mean, it's not quite that simple, but it's almost that simple. Crypto Caleb asks, do you need both nodes and tokens for tilling, or you need only tokens when compute begins? Well, it depends on how much currency units you want to make. So if you own the license and you own the tokens, you're going to get paid because you own the tokens that get stuck in the nodes. They marry together, 1,024 per node. And once they are married together, that node, so I'll even back it up one step further. Nodes are measured once all of this kicks in. These nodes are measuring compute they're measuring uptime, they're measuring reputation. Each one of these value, the maximum value 1.26, 1.26, 1.26. That doesn't mean anything. But as you do more compute, establish more uptime, get a better reputation, you can get to a score of 2. 1 times 1 times 1, right? Compute times uptime times reputation. And if that gets to 2, the node splits. If the node splits and you have sufficient equipment to continue doing compute, you're getting twice the revenue. So owning the nodes could, each one node, of course, when you first marry the tokens, you put 1,024 tokens into that node. If it splits once, you now have 2 nodes, twice the compute revenue, each one earning on, because you had 1,024, so now you have 512 and 512. And you split it again. You do that 10 times, 10 splits, which conceivably could happen in 6 years, because the fastest you could do it is 6 months. But conceive, like in a perfect magical world with great uptime, beep, 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 you split in 6 years. You know, every one node is now 1,024 nodes of a single token each. So if you were making $10, I mean, I don't know. If you were making $3 a day, and now you have 1,024 nodes, of course, you'd have to scale up your facilities, or the facility that you're at would have to have sufficient hardware bandwidth. You get it. But in that perfect world, your one node became 1,024 nodes. Your $3, it's not $3 a day anymore, is it? No. It's like 72. What is it? 3,072, something like that. So that's good. That would be good. 3,072 is better than $3 per day, I think. So if you had 2 nodes or 8 nodes, like we, through Digital Investor, you can get packets of 8 or 32 nodes. That's the only way we do it. And those are all, you can break those down. You can push them off in different directions. So anyway, it's just something to think about as far as like an entrepreneur, but you need to look at it, I think, as like running a little data center. Does that make sense? Yeah. So anyway, there we go. Yay. Okay. I think we should switch gears. Let's do a little schoolwork. This is just going to be like a short little kind of 5-minute talk about deflation and deflationary mindset. I do think it's important because, you know, we don't always maybe think about the act of thinking. That's kind of where my mind has been at a lot, which has kind of pushed me down the rabbit hole of AI. That's why we made so much money in AI. So anyway, class is in session.
Hello. You're late.
You're bad at math, but I'm giving you an A+ in confidence.
Just doing what I gotta do.
Extra credit.
Never gets old. Okay, so let's discuss. See the balloon? See the little poof bursting? Yes. Okay. Now it's a cool picture. I'm gonna leave it big. I love that picture. All right. Deflation. When you go into a deflationary environment, here's the preamble for all this. When people deal with economic circumstances, a depression, a recession, you make changes, and those changes, those become habits, and those habits echo into the financial system because of your spending behavior and your psychology, which is it's all wrapped up together, right? So it is important to kind of think about this stuff. So if we're discussing the consumer and the investor, because in this case we're both, right? All of us are both consumers and investors in a deflationary mindset of like, how do people behave during economic downturns and the lasting effects? So when the economy takes a downturn, the effects ripple through society, obviously, and it impacts consumers and investors, right? Which We are both, right? You're an investor, you're in front of the computer, you're doing all this stuff, but you're also like a human that goes out and, like, if you have a car that has gas, you buy gas. If you eat, you buy food and things like that. So the fear and uncertainty that accompany economic downturns often leads to a deflationary mindset among individuals. And this mindset is characterized by a more cautious approach towards spending, a more conservative approach towards investing. So in kind of the next few minutes, we just want to explore, and I want you guys to think about the various aspects of the deflationary mindset and how we all might behave during an economic downturn, as well as the lasting effects that might be observed after we've already bottomed out on our way back up. What's interesting about the crypto space is you can be both. If you're investing in AI and kind of forward thinking big data, you're winning. So you're in an economic upcycle. If you're in the traditional crypto space, you're in a downturn or near the trough. If you're in the macroeconomic landscape and you're out in the equity space or real estate, I hope you realize we're either on the precipice or in a recession, but we're definitely in a deflationary environment. So you may start noticing that behavior in the people around you. Because remember, don't assume that because you're into crypto and you're into AI and all this, that everyone else is. Everyone else is not. Even in the investment space, even in the crypto investment space, most people are not, right? So there you're like ahead of the curve. Anyway, so let's talk deflationary mindset. But let me also eat one of my little red things that keeps me from coughing. They're so good. There's like a cherry and menthol. Who would have thought that could be good? Anyway, during economic downturns, consumers and investors, us, we tend to adopt a deflationary mindset. And this mindset's driven by the fear of financial instability, that unknown, and this desire to protect our assets, right? So you're building, you get to a point where it's all about protection. And that's a shift. It's kind of like, a race car driver. The mindset of the guy in second place is a lot different than the guy in first place. Or in golf, when people convert to playing not to lose, it's a different game. So in such times, consumers become much more hesitant to spend. We don't want to spend our money on non-essential items, and we start prioritizing savings and hopefully paying off debt, right? Because that's that especially predatory debt or that credit card debt that's just like a monster, like it's always kind of nibbling away at your pool. Investors, they may they may become more risk averse, and then they start, some of the things they may have been willing to invest in, they're no longer willing to invest in them because they think, well, that's too risky. I don't know if that's going to make it. You start looking at prices come down, things look even less interesting, even though if it's quality assets, it should look more interesting. But again, this is a mindset change because you're seeing all around you these effects of deflation, these effects of recession or near recession. Anyway, we become more risk averse and we seek more safe haven investments that are perceived to be less vulnerable to market volatility. One of the key characteristics of the deflationary mindset is this shift towards being frugal. So we start to scrutinize our spending habits and we cut back on discretionary expenses. And even if you have the money, things just look more expensive. You can't rationalize or justify the behavior. So this can have a significant impact on certain industries like travel, hospitality, luxury goods. And so these will experience a decline in demand, right? And that can have all these ripple effects throughout the macro, which can exacerbate what you're seeing and what you're feeling. So investors become more cautious. They look for opportunities to minimize losses rather than maximizing their gains. And they tend to opt for very low risk investments like government bonds, freaking gold in the crypto space, Bitcoin, which I'm not a hater, I'm just saying. And so these are considered more safe havens during economic downturns. with the exception of Bitcoin. I don't think Bitcoin is a safe haven at all. Matter of fact, I don't think anything in the crypto space is a safe haven yet because the market's not fully formed yet. It's still a very but that's where we're at. Anyway, another aspect of the deflationary mindset is the reduced willingness to take on debt. So as consumers and investors become more risk averse, they will shy away from borrowing money, because you fear, well, maybe I can't repay it, right? Like, I don't know if the checks keep rolling in. I was looking at a house about 3 or 4 months ago, and I'm less interested in buying something right now. I'd say, I'm going to push the pause button and I'm just going to wait because I like the idea of having money rather than having a bunch of debt. Now, we're going to dig into this a lot because there's all sorts of ways you can look at the future and short the dollar through taking on certain kinds of real estate debt and stuff like that. That's a different discussion for a different day. Right now, let's just talk about the brain side of it. So our reluctance to take on debt can further dampen economic activity, and it reduces the availability of credit, free-flowing cash. It limits investment opportunities, less people looking at less stuff. It also affects businesses that rely on credit to finance their operations. It makes it harder for them to weather the economic storm. Look at commercial real estate and what a mess that is. Even companies that have a really good track record are finding it impossible to get loans. So there is that. Okay, now we have behavior during economic downturns. So during a downturn, a clear downturn where everybody agrees, people's behavior undergo very significant changes. The fear and uncertainty that accompanies these periods lead to reactions both at the individual level and at the societal level. So one of the common behaviors observed during economic downturns is increased savings, right? We start saving and saving and saving. And as an individual becomes more concerned about their financial stability, they tend to save a larger portion of their income, meaning they're not spending it. So if I have $10 and normally I would spend $6 and save $4, and I start saving $6 and spending $4, that's a 50% reduction in economic activity. You think, God, just that? Yes, just that. So, yeah, I mean, it can have profound effects, especially if you buy into this bullshit of the invisible hand and that every dollar creates $5, which is not true. A dollar is just a dollar. But if you shut off velocity in the economy, if money is not moving around or it's moving at a much slower pace, if you buy into the velocity of money stuff, which I don't personally, but you can see it can have at least your own effect, but a much greater psychological effect because other people see less spending and they start saving on the aggregate, spending less on the aggregate. So behavior kind of breeds. So people tend to save a larger portion of their income. They focus on building an emergency fund or hopefully paying off debt. The increased savings can have this kind of cascading effect as other people see it and other people see it, and it reduces aggregate consumer spending, which is one of the key drivers of economic growth. So I think everything feeds on itself, both in the good and on the bad. Another behavior observed during economic downturns is a shift towards value-based purchasing. And so that's where consumers become more price conscious and they prioritize getting the most value for their money. This can lead to a surge in demand for discount retailers and private label brands because people will stretch. They like, who here is not loving Temu? Is that not the most badass website? This is not an ad because they don't have enough money. The stuff is so cheap there, they have zero money for advertising. But look, you can get a Russian boxcar full of clothes at Temu for like $60. It would be like $10,000 worth of stuff anywhere else. I don't know how they do it. It's overstock in China, basically. Anyway, point is, people start looking for these little opportunities to curtail spending and become much more thrifty and frugal. Similarly, investors become more focused on finding undervalued assets that have the potential for longer term growth or bigger explosion. So you start looking differently. You start looking for what's the bigger hit, the bigger move, the bigger long term. Which there's nothing wrong with. There's nothing wrong with that. You might analyze companies much more rigorously, like with your 5 T's, and you look for those with strong fundamentals, good business model, good leadership. You ask, why do the tokens exist, or why does their equity exist? You ask, am I entering or am I exit liquidity? Right? Like, is there more meat on the bone? You do a much more deeper study of the potential of these things. So, keep that in mind, that kind of strong fundamental value investing, right? You notice these things point towards value investing, which I say you should always be a value investor. And then you don't worry about cycles. You're just always value investing. Finally, economic downturns can lead to increased, and they should lead to increased skepticism and a loss of trust in financial institutions and authorities. That kind of like people go, wait, what's the point of the Fed again? Yeah, that's right. What's the point of the SEC again if they just step on people's neck? Yeah, that's right. People should feel betrayed by the system and question the fairness of the economic landscape. It might be worth looking at what, billionaires are doing, not in an angry way, but like, is it an even playing field? If not, maybe it's time to write that letter to a congressman. But this loss of trust can have lasting effects because it shakes people's attitudes and behaviors. And even after the economy recovers, it can lead to a more conservative approach to finance, especially if you are learning or taking your investment education forward during a period of economic downturn. That cements in you, those are your formative investing years, right? Where you're learning what you're going to do in the future. Again, let's forget about AI for a second, because 3 years, none of this will matter. But right now, it does matter, because it's the beauty pageant and we're just competing against the people around us. So all of this can lead to a much more conservative approach to finance in general, and individuals may opt for much more transparent and ethical investment options, right? So, and then finally, that you have these kind of lasting effects. And the effects of economic downturns can be, obviously long lasting, especially the duration of the downturn. If it's a slow grind, then that's going to have even longer effects, because you bring more people into this behavior, into this mindset. The effects of downturns, in addition to being long lasting, they affect the economy far after, like when you get sick, but you still feel sick even though you're not sick, months after you were sick. It's the same kind of thing. The deflationary mindset and the behaviors adopted during the downturn can persist for a long time, and this shapes people's financial decisions and attitudes towards risk. So for consumers, the experience of a downturn can instill like this sense of caution and like prudence, kind of all nervousness, and they may continue to prioritize savings and being frugal even long after the economy improves. And sometimes they will miss opportunities because they're so concerned. I mean, we all have older relatives. They're like clutching their purse and all this kind of stuff. Like, you get it. So they may prioritize savings and being frugal long after the economy's turned around and gone up. And this can have implications for industries that rely on consistent consumer spending, because they may face a more cautious and much more price sensitive base of potential customers. Similarly, on the investment side, those of us who experience losses during an economic downturn may become more risk averse in the long term. I mean, I know that what I experienced from 2014 to 2016 in crypto, and then late 2017 to 2019, that obviously affects my psychology, and it affects the way that I will invest. Having seen money units go way up and way down and way back up, there are lasting effects. The memory, I think we're like an elephant when it comes to getting our asses kicked. The memory of financial hardship can influence our investment decisions, and it leads us to favor safer options and avoid speculative investments. And this can impact the availability of capital for startups, other high-risk ventures, potentially slowing down innovation and economic growth, which is weird because right now we're seeing both a slowdown in the macro and a huge ramp up in the AI space. So we're at a very weird kind of inflection point. This is why it's even more important, I think, to be a value investor. So the lasting effects of an economic downturn can also extend to the broader societal level. The loss of trust in financial institutions and authorities can fuel a desire for greater transparency and accountability. And this can lead to regulatory changes and reforms aimed at preventing future crises. Only you can't do that because there are no tools to prevent future, right? And so these are all just kind of smoke and mirrory, bullshitty type things. Monetary policy, it's not really policy and it's not really monetary. There's nothing quantitative about quantitative anything, easing or tightening, because there's no math involved. It's mostly psychology. But then again, what we're talking about is psychology. People sleep better at night if they think somebody that knows more than them is doing something that's going to have some effect. But it's all pretty much theater. So regulatory changes and reform aimed at preventing future crises usually don't do anything good, but they make people think that it's ensuring a fair economic landscape, again, which we all know is bullcrap, but it is what it is. The effects of these downturns, therefore, go way beyond the immediate financial impact, and it shapes the future of our thinking, of the consumer's thinking, and just society as a whole. You have a lot of people that don't invest in anything. So this deflationary mindset and the behaviors exhibited by those of us who endure these economic downturns has a profound effect on both the economy and society and the investment landscape. And the cautious approach to spending and investing, the increased focus on savings and value-based investing, fundamental analysis, and this lasting effects that you can see through financial decisions and attitudes towards risk, they all contribute to this very complex psychology of not just the economic downturn, but moving forward after the downturn. Like, how long into a bull market do you wait before you participate? This is why most people don't touch any buttons. They just index all of their shit in and kind of hope for the best. And if you understand these behaviors, at least you understand that these lasting effects are crucial as an investor. You need to understand, but also policymakers, businesses, they all need to kind of understand that the mindset is not just during the downturn, and that there are a lot of opportunities. There's challenges too, but there's a lot of opportunities during economic cycles, especially downturns, because like we discuss quite frequently, it's what you do when these markets are down with quality asset investment. And it's what you do with your currency units in the free world, your behaviors. You can be both, have a deflationary mindset. You can be frugal with your spending, and you can be a value investor with your investing. You can be, does that make sense? So keep all of this stuff in mind. There is no one answer. It's that you do need to chew on this stuff. You need to churn it. You need to think about thinking. And when you're investing, and even if you're not investing, when you're looking around, when you guys are banging around out there in society, look around at people's behavior. People are spending more time looking at prices, reading labels. Why? The frugal mindset is setting in. So keep this in mind. This is going to help you front run people. That's all we're trying to do. We just need to front run people by 6 or 8 months. That's it. And yeah, that's great. You know, parents and grandparents that went through the Great Depression, look at their behavior. You know, it starts to become quite obviously, oh man, gosh, that doesn't. So anyway, I hope that today you just got a little bit of brain goo that you can play with. It is important to grapple with these things. And again, nothing that I've said is groundbreaking or shocking. Sometimes it's important to really think about the way you think and think about the way your peers think, because that's who you're competing with. If you outthink your peers by 6 to 8 months, you get flipping rich, because that's repeatable. You can repeatedly outperform your peers because your peers don't do any work. And you do. And if you do the work, you win. It's that simple. There's no more bit boy to rely on. We have to just do the work ourselves. Anyway, stay in school. Don't do drugs. Don't do anything. My poor insolvent drunk, struggling on meth grandmother, or Brandon, who's just clacking away right now. We got some cool stuff coming for the digital investors and digital private clients. I can't yet say what it is that we're doing. We're building 2 tools. Also, we're going to have, we're working on GPT-4 integration into the back end so that you'll have access to GPT-4, because there's an enterprise version of GPT. So we're working on that. And we're working on 2 other things that I can't yet talk about. They do have to do with, I can't even talk about it. Anyway, those will be for digital investors, digital private clients. Yay. All right. So, man, think about thinking. We'll see you tomorrow for the normal show, Digital Investor. Woo woo.